Most people hear the words Great Pyramid of Giza, and their brain autofills the same explanation they've heard their entire life. A tomb, a monument, a symbolic resting place built for a god-king, sealed up, sacred, untouchable, and ultimately dead. But the longer you stare at that explanation, the more it starts to feel like a story we inherited, not a conclusion we earned. Because if the Great Pyramid is just a tomb, it's easily the strangest tomb in human history. No wall art, no definitive hieroglyphic. This is who is buried here. No rich burial inventory. No mummy. No clear funerary narrative inside it, the way we see in other Egyptian tombs. Instead, we find something that looks engineered, purpose-built, like a structure designed to do something. And that's where this gets interesting, because once you start looking at the pyramid as a device instead of a monument, a new question appears, and it asks a dangerous one. What if the Great Pyramid was built to generate or manipulate energy, and Tesla, centuries later, stumbled onto the same underlying principles? If you're into questions that aren't comfortable, you're in the right place. And before we go further, if you like these deep dives where we chase the weird stuff all the way to the edge, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. It helps this channel more than you'd think, and it makes sure you don't miss what we uncover next. Now, let's set the tone clearly. What we're talking about today is a theory, a controversial one. Parts of it touch real physics resonance, conductivity, insulation, the piezoelectric effect, electromagnetic wave behavior. Other parts move into speculation, ancient intent, lost technology, suppressed knowledge, what really happened to certain discoveries. Our goal isn't to force belief. Our goal is to follow the thread, separate what's measurable from what's inferred, and ask the kind of questions mainstream explanations often wave away because they're inconvenient. Because here's the thing. The official story doesn't have to be a lie to be incomplete. It can be partly true, culturally convenient, and still miss the deeper reality. Let's start with Nikola Tesla, because Tesla is the bridge that makes this theory feel almost inevitable. Tesla wasn't just an inventor. He thought like someone trying to hack reality. He was obsessed with resonance, with frequency, with the idea that the Earth itself could behave like part of an electrical system. Tesla believed that energy could be transmitted wirelessly, not just in the phone charger sense we understand today, but on a planetary scale. The idea was bigger than gadgets. He imagined a world where power could be distributed without copper networks, without countless miles of wired infrastructure, without a system that could be controlled by whoever owned the grids. He built Wardenclyffe Tower with a vision that sounds like science fiction even now. Use the Earth as part of the circuit, drive resonance through natural layers of the planet, and transmit energy through the ground and atmosphere in a way that could be received elsewhere. Whether you think it would have worked or not, Tesla's goal was radical. It wasn't make electricity cheaper. It was make electricity abundant. And abundant energy changes everything: economics, politics, war, industry, control. So when people say Tesla's more ambitious work was shut down, you can see why that idea sticks. Because the moment something threatens the structure of who owns energy, you're not dealing with science anymore. You're dealing with power. And here's where the legend gets sharper. Tesla's early experiments showed real results in wireless transmission at smaller scales. He demonstrated phenomena that modern engineers still respect, and he built systems that proved energy could travel through fields in ways most people don't intuitively understand. But Tesla also died broke, alone, with many projects incomplete, and after his death, stories exploded about missing notes, seized documents, vanished breakthroughs. Some of that is sensationalized. Some of it is grounded in the reality that Tesla's work became highly scrutinized and highly mythologized. But even if you strip away the drama, one fact remains. Tesla believed the Earth had usable energy dynamics that we barely tap into, and he believed resonance was the key. Now hold that idea in your mind. Because we're about to walk into the Great Pyramid and ask whether the pyramid looks like a structure designed to resonate, focus, and move energy. Mainstream Egyptology typically frames the Great Pyramid as a 4th dynasty tomb built for Khufu around 4,500 years ago. That's the baseline. The problem is that the internal design of the Great Pyramid doesn't feel like a typical tomb. The passages are narrow, the chambers are stark, and the place is almost aggressively minimal in terms of expected funerary decoration. No murals, no story of the afterlife painted on the walls, no confirmed treasure caches, and most importantly, there is no confirmed mummy ever found inside any pyramid in the way people imagine. You can argue looting, you can argue time, you can argue history, but you still end up with a structure so monumental, so mathematically precise, so physically extreme, that "it's a tomb" starts sounding like saying a nuclear submarine is a metal tube for sleeping. Technically, you could sleep in it, sure, but if that's your explanation, you're missing the real purpose. Because the Great Pyramid isn't just big, it's precise in ways that seem unnecessary for a symbolic monument. The alignment is one of the biggest red flags or the biggest clues, depending on how you see it. The sides of the pyramid align to cardinal directions with startling accuracy. The base is leveled to within a tiny margin. The sides, despite being hundreds of feet long and made of multi-ton stone blocks, are remarkably consistent. This isn't good enough for the ancient world. This is good enough to challenge modern construction. And that should immediately force a second question. Why spend that level of precision on something that is meant to be sealed and never function again? Tombs don't need that. Machines do. And then we get to the geometry that feels like the pyramid is hiding a second identity. One of the strangest features is that it may not have 4 flat faces in the way people imagine. Each face appears slightly concave, meaning the pyramid is effectively 8-sided, a subtle indentation that becomes visible under certain lighting conditions or from aerial perspectives. That's not an accident you stumble into with stacked stone. If that's intentional, then you're looking at design complexity that suggests an understanding of light, shadow, structural stress, maybe even wave behavior. Again, a tomb does not need that, but a structure meant to interact with the environment might. Now add the number that keeps showing up in these discussions: 43,200. In some interpretations, scaling the pyramid's dimensions by this number produces values that approximate Earth's measurements, polar radius, equatorial circumference. Skeptics say this is forced numerology, cherry-picked ratios, coincidence dressed up as destiny. Believers say it's a signature, a deliberate encoding of planetary knowledge. Here is the honest way to treat it. We should be careful with claims that rely on multiply by a special number and look what happens. Humans are pattern machines. We can make almost anything look meaningful if we hunt long enough. But the reason this argument keeps returning is because it's not just a number trick sitting on top of a deeper observation. The pyramid's builders had an obsession with precision that feels excessive unless the structure had a functional role. Whether 43,200 is cosmic intent or coincidence, the underlying question survives. Why build like this? Now let's talk materials, because this is where the power plant theory tries to stand on physical ground instead of myth. The pyramid was originally faced with polished white limestone casing stones. Those stones weren't just pretty. They were cut and fitted with such tight seams that you could barely slide a blade between them. That matters because a tightly sealed exterior changes internal conditions: temperature stability, humidity control, acoustic behavior, and potentially electrical behavior, depending on the materials involved. And according to certain arguments, the casing limestone, especially if it had different mineral composition than local stone, could behave more like an insulator than a conductor compared to the internal stone types. That sets up a classic engineering pattern: an exterior that resists leakage and an interior designed to conduct or transform energy. Inside, You find granite in key chambers and passageways, particularly the king's chamber and structures above it. Granite isn't just a fancy rock. Granite contains quartz, and quartz is famous for the piezoelectric effect. When pressure or vibration is applied, it can generate electrical charge. That effect is real. It's why quartz appears in modern devices, timekeeping, sensors, and systems that convert mechanical stress into electrical signals. So when people point out granite has quartz, they're not making that up. The leap happens when they say, therefore, the pyramid must have been engineered to compress and vibrate quartz-rich granite to generate significant power. That is the hypothesis. The real question is, could the pyramid's internal architecture plausibly produce the kinds of pressure, vibration, and resonance needed to make that effect meaningful on a large scale? This is where some theorists, including people like Christopher Dunn, propose a multi-stage process. Underground water movement creates vibrations. Vibrations travel upward through internal structures. Chambers and shafts behave like acoustic elements. Resonance intensifies. Pressure builds. Specific chemical processes occur. Hydrogen is generated. Hydrogen moves through the system. The granite responds under pressure and vibration. And the structure focuses energy. That's a chain of steps. Some parts of the chain have real science behind them. Water can create vibration. Chambers can resonate. Materials respond to stress. Gases under pressure behave predictably. Other parts hinge on claims like traces of certain chemicals in shafts, implying purposeful chemical production. The reason this becomes persuasive to some audiences is because it tells a system story. Not magic, not aliens, a machine story. The hydrogen angle is where it gets wild. The claim goes like this. The Queen's chamber was a kind of reaction chamber. Two shafts leading into it contain evidence of chemical residues. Combine certain chemicals, and you can produce hydrogen. And hydrogen under pressure, moving through narrow passages, could behave in ways that amplify resonance and pressure dynamics. Hydrogen is also central to many energy theories because it burns cleanly and carries potential. In this story, the Grand Gallery becomes a resonant pressure corridor, and the King's Chamber becomes a tuned resonator, sometimes described using concepts like Helmholtz resonance, where chamber size and openings determine resonant frequency, like blowing over a bottle. Whether every detail is correct or not, the idea is that the pyramid is not a pile of stone. It's a shaped instrument, a gigantic stone circuit built from materials selected for specific physical behavior. And then there's the modern twist that gave this theory fresh oxygen: studies around electromagnetic interaction. Some experiments and simulations in recent years have explored how pyramidal structures can concentrate electromagnetic energy under certain conditions, particularly when wavelengths interact with the geometry in a resonant way. People interpret this as proof the pyramid focuses energy. Skeptics interpret it as any conductive or dielectric structure can create field concentration under the right wavelengths. This doesn't mean it was built as a power plant. Both can be true. Geometry affects fields. Fields concentrate. That's real. The question is intent. Did ancient builders design for that? Or is this an accidental property of the shape? Here is the key point. Even accidental properties can become meaningful if a civilization discovered them experimentally. You don't need modern theory to notice. When we do this, something happens. You need curiosity, iteration, and time. Now, how does Tesla connect back in a way that isn't just storytelling? Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower was built with deep grounding, metal infrastructure, and an obsession with Earth coupling. He wanted to interact with the planet like it was part of the machine. The pyramid, according to some claims, may have had metal elements, copper components, an internal design that suggests controlled flows, not just of people, but of forces. If Tesla believed you could transmit energy through Earth resonance and atmospheric coupling, and if the pyramid was built on aquifers with internal granite resonance structures, you can see why people draw a line between the two. It doesn't prove anything by itself, but it forms a provocative map. Two very different eras, two very different systems, one shared idea, resonance plus Earth plus transmission. Then we hit the part of the story where economics walks in and science walks out, the J.P. Morgan narrative. A simplified version goes like this. Morgan funded Tesla, expecting a communications breakthrough. Tesla expanded the vision to power transmission. Morgan withdrew support. Tesla's project collapsed. In reality, funding dynamics are messy, and it's easy to flatten history into a villain story. But the broader truth is still important. World-scale power distribution isn't just a technical challenge. It's a business model challenge. Whoever owns the distribution owns the profit, the leverage, and the control. A system that makes energy virtually free doesn't just disrupt the market. It disrupts the entire hierarchy built on scarcity. And whether or not Morgan personally killed Tesla's dream, the incentives of the era were aligned against Tesla's most utopian version of the project. That's not a conspiracy. That's capitalism doing what capitalism does. Now our responsible channel has to address something else. Even if the pyramid could focus energy, even if quartz could generate charge under stress, even if hydrogen could be produced, where is the undeniable evidence of electricity use in ancient Egypt? That's the hardest question, and believers often answer it by saying, maybe the Egyptians didn't build it, they inherited it. Maybe the pyramid predates dynastic Egypt and was later reinterpreted. That idea ties into alternative history frameworks that place the pyramid complex far earlier than 400 or 500 years ago, sometimes aligning it with astronomical patterns like Orion's belt, or linking the Sphinx to an age when its alignment would match Leo. Again, intriguing, not proven. But what about geology? The Sphinx erosion argument, water erosion versus wind and sand, has been used to suggest the site could be older than the official timeline. If the region experienced significant water events long before dynastic Egypt, and if erosion patterns match intense rainfall or flooding, it raises questions. Not definitive answers questions. Then the theory pulls in a cataclysm narrative. The end of the Younger Dryas, rapid climate shifts, floods, societal resets. Every culture has a flood myth. Lost continents like Atlantis, a civilization that disappears and leaves behind megalithic remnants. This is where the storyline becomes the most cinematic and also the most vulnerable to exaggeration. Climate has shifted dramatically in Earth's history. Floods have happened. Myths exist worldwide. But moving from that to, there was a global advanced civilization with power plants, is a big jump. And it's a jump some people are willing to make because the alternative feels equally unsatisfying. That ancient humans built impossibly precise monuments with no clear functional purpose. And we just shrug and say, religion. The truth could be somewhere in between. A culture can be spiritually motivated and still be technically brilliant. A structure can be symbolic and also functional. Those aren't mutually exclusive. So let us ask the cleanest version of the question. If you wanted to build a structure that could act like a resonance system, concentrate energy, and protect internal processes from environmental interference, what would you do? You might build an insulated exterior. You might build conductive internal chambers. You might use quartz-rich stone in stress-loaded areas. You might create shafts that control airflow or gas movement. You might tune chambers for resonance. You might build it on a site where underground water could contribute vibration. And you might seal it with craftsmanship, so precise it behaves like a controlled environment. That list is exactly why the pyramid power plant theory refuses to die, because it doesn't start from mythology. It starts from engineering intuition. But there's a second reason it refuses to die, the emotional weight of the conclusion. If the pyramid was a machine, then history is wrong in a way that would change how we see ourselves. It implies advanced knowledge can be lost. It implies progress isn't linear. It implies our ancestors may have touched forces we're only now rediscovering. And it implies that the greatest human breakthroughs might not be inventions. They might be recoveries. And that is why Tesla becomes such a powerful symbol in this story. Tesla feels like a man who almost pulled something forgotten back into the modern world. And then the world said, no, not yet. Not like that. Now, before we land this, I want to be clear about something. Some versions of this narrative get reckless. They claim certainty where there is none. They present speculation as fact. They cherry-pick evidence and ignore the parts that don't fit. We don't do that here. The honest position is this. The Great Pyramid is an engineering mystery. Tesla's ambitions were real and revolutionary, and the overlap in themes, resonance, earth coupling, energy transmission is compelling enough to investigate. That does not mean we can declare the pyramid was definitely a power plant and drop the mic. It means we have a theory that asks better questions than the tomb narrative usually does. It means we should not be afraid of exploring alternative models, as long as we stay honest about what we know, what we suspect, and what we're still missing. So where does that leave us? If the pyramid's power plant theory is wrong, it still forces mainstream explanations to answer uncomfortable details. Why such precision? Why such materials? Why such internal design? Why the emptiness where a tomb identity should be obvious? If the theory is partially right, then the pyramid may have been designed with physical behaviors in mind that we don't to fully understand, yet acoustic resonance, field concentration, environmental sealing. And if the theory is largely right, then we are re-looking at evidence that ancient engineering may have had a functional relationship with energy systems long before modern industry ever existed. And that's not just a historical curiosity. That's a philosophical earthquake, because it would mean the world has been here before in ways we refuse to imagine. If you made it this far, you're exactly the kind of person this channel is for. If you want more episodes like this, where we take the official story, test it against the weird details, and follow the evidence into uncomfortable territory, like drop a comment with what you think the pyramid was really built for, and subscribe so you don't miss the next upload. And if you've got a topic you want us to investigate, leave it below. We read them, we build from them, and we're just getting started. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and find the truth.